Welcome everyone. Hello. I hope you are doing well. My name is Bhagyashri and I would be the host for today's exciting event. I would firstly like to thank you all for taking the time out to attend our interactive learning power hour session hosted by Harbinger. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Power Hour is a series of interactive roundtable discussions amongst the industry stalwarts, where they would be sharing their experiences and insights on a particular topic. So the topic for today's discussion would be building competitive advantage by leveraging product OEM strategy, brought to you by Scheme Through Harbinger. Before we begin, a few housekeeping tips. In case you cannot hear the audio, ensure you have selected the right speaker for the audio output. You may test the scene to see if it is working fine from the audio setting options from the lower left corner on your set screen. If necessary, please dial in using phone. With that, now it's a time for the introduction. Our host for today's roundtable is Shrikant Pattathil. Shrikant's innovations in formulating sound technical approaches to the business problems are consistently appreciated by our customers. His solutions have ranged from development frameworks, data architectures, schema designs, to test the strategies for applications for a thin client, rich client, desktop, etc. Shrikant is also our go-to person for the latest know-how on shifting technology paradigms. We welcome you, Shrikant, and over to you.
Thanks, Bhagyashri. Welcome everyone to this Harbinger Power Hour panel discussion on product OEM strategies. Today, we're going to discuss how OEMs can help you build a competitive advantage. To share more insights on this topic, we have a great panel with us today. I will introduce them in a few minutes before I give you a quick overview of what are the things we're going to cover in the next 50 to 60 minutes. So let me do that first. So in this session, we'll discuss market drivers for OEM strategy, various approaches one may take while doing OEMs, and how it can be a win-win situation for all stakeholders in an OEM relationship. OEM being a very vast topic, one of the things that we realized is we probably in this discussion won't be able to cover everything. There are things like legal aspects, marketplaces, hardware, software, OEMs, and so forth. So we'll primarily talk about OEMs in the context of software products and what strategies are involved there. Talk about approaches and the success parameters there. We will touch upon some of the other topics in our examples, but we may not be able to go in depth in some of those areas. So our discussion today is divided into three parts. Firstly, we'll start with some overview and get you warmed up with some examples. We will then discuss different types of OEMs, and followed by, we will talk about the checklist that is necessary to build a successful OEM partnership. Before we get started with our actual discussion and we go deeper in that, I wanted to take a step back and highlight the key players in an OEM relationship. The main player, of course, is the platform company, which reaches out to the end customer to solution the end customer experiences. A typical example could be CRM. And an OEM technology provider is usually somebody who provides a feature or a service which plugs into or is consumed as a part of that platform. So for example, it could be analytics or reporting, or maybe a contract management within the overall scheme of things. To give you a more concrete example from a Harbinger perspective, for example, we have an AI tool which helps you navigate through videos quickly and hit the high spots. Now, the skim through as a product can be consumed by individual users and they can skim through their videos quickly. However, it really is impactful when it is embedded as a part of a platform that has a very large video library. For example, a training platform or a video interviewing platform or a collaboration platform. And from the platform perspective, it gives the platform company some advantages in terms of beating competition with some of these cool features that it may not have readily in their product. So it's a win-win for probably both parties. Now that we've given the examples, let's go back to our topic about OEMs and why OEMs are really important. So based on our research and analysis, the key drivers for OEM is primarily things like time to market, user experience, and appealing to multiple stakeholders within the buying community. Now, we all know that as the companies grow in size, as they build software, it's not possible to build everything on time with the customer's demand. And of course, when you're selling, you need to have as many features because you don't know what feature is going to be really be a wow factor for your buyer. So therefore, in such scenarios, having an OEM partnership or a relationship helps both parties to make it a win-win sort of a situation. So given this background, and now is probably a best time for us to bring in our panelists, introduce them and ask them to share their experiences. So let me invite them on board, welcome them. Mike, Patrick, and Thomas. Mike Morrison, Chief Information Officer at Kaptyn. Patrick Maroney, Best Practices Advisor, High Tech Industry, Sept. And Thomas Abraham, Founder, HR2 Tech. No, apologies. So starting with Mike. Mike, why don't you do a quick introduction and maybe share some of your experiences around OEMs?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Mike Morrison, pleased to be here today with everyone. I've got a little over 25 years plus experience building early stage and growth stage technology companies, have lived the OEM life both as a partner customer as well as a supplier of technology. So certainly know this topic very well. At Kaptyn, we are a smart fleet technology company and an operator of electric vehicles. We focus on smart technology, smart fleet operations, and clean energy and EV infrastructure. And so we support a lot of different fleets with technologies, and there's never enough time or resources to provide all the value that our customers are asking for. So we definitely partner and OEM certain aspects of solutions that we build into our platforms.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for that introduction. Patrick, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shrikant, and thanks for having me here today. Really enjoy the opportunity. I feel honored to be amongst my colleagues, Mike, Thomas, and yourself to discuss this topic. My role, I'm a principal in SAP's Industry Executive Advisory Group, and I focus on the high-tech sector specifically, which consists of semiconductor, EMS, electronics manufacturers, and software companies. SAP both OEMs our partner solutions and has partners that OEM our solutions. And it's a major driving factor in high tech for big companies and for small companies alike. When it's done right, there is tremendous value for our customers and all of the partners involved. So excited to expand on that as we go through the panel discussion today.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, look forward to your views as well as we dig deeper into some of our conversations. Thomas, over to you.
Yeah, thank Shrikant for this invitation to be on this panel, and I really look forward to the conversation with yourself, Patrick and Mike. So yeah, my name's Thomas Abraham. I've spent 30 years in the corporate world. My last role was CEO of Wolters Kluwer Tax and Accounting in India. And before that, I was the CEO of Sage Software in India. But I must confess that the most exciting part of my professional life has been the last 5 years. I've had the honor and opportunity to work with a number of, B2B SaaS startups and really helping them with their business strategy, go to market, helping many of them set up strategic alliances and also expanding them, globally. In recent times, I have also partnered with an accelerator out of the US by the name of Hexa Global Ventures. And, I'm really excited to, take some innovative SaaS companies from this part of the world into the US, really help them land and then expand. We already have a pipeline of companies and OEM is something which is very close to my heart. And this is something that I firmly believe in. And I've been encouraging all the companies in my portfolio to look at OEM opportunities for landing and expanding in either geographically or wherever. And we'll discuss lots more in this conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for that. And looking at the experience we have here with the panelists, I'm pretty sure we'd probably be able to tackle all the questions anybody has thought about as far as OEMs are concerned. So I feel great. You could make time today and we could have this discussion. So going further into our topic and moving into our next section, that's about the different types of OEM. So I've shared my screen. Hopefully we can see it. Okay, cool. Thank you. So we want to talk about, as the industry has emerged, it probably makes sense to kind of classify how OEMs are organized today. So there are different types. So in our experience over the last 20-25 years, we have seen majorly 4 different types of OEM relationships. What we call them first is like the source, like where you are connected, you are actually licensing your source code to somebody and that's embedded within some software. It's probably the next level is a component where you're wrapping your solution or your idea in a component, and that's being licensed into a software or a platform. The more bigger you get, probably you start thinking about OEMing a solution, which is probably has multiple features and multiple facets about that you provide. But still, it's provided as an OEM. It doesn't exist as an individual product. And over the last maybe 10 years or so, we have seen this exponential growth of this whole marketplace concept as well. And so that's again one more whole aspect of how you could collaborate and jointly take products to the market. Now, how this is experienced or depends upon the stage where you are or the business that you are in. So if you are a developer, typically you would be happy doing a source code license, or you're doing a framework-based licensing. And typically, if you are a startup or a mid-sized company as well, I gave you the skim through example. We're just starting out, so we may be okay doing licensing it like a component and completely white labeling that in a large platform or a solution. However, as you move to larger platforms or you move to the community side, what you see is most of the products are offered, though they may be OEM, the whole branding aspect also comes in. So if you're today experiencing Power BI as a part of some software, you would see that though the reports are being delivered, the branding of Power BI does come up many a time. So typically, the larger the solution, the co-branding and the coexistence becomes kind of vital. And if you are a very large company like Sept, for example, from where Patrick is, I'm pretty sure they have a whole marketplace and a community where they are encouraging people to come in and put their products. And though it's not a traditional OEM concept, but still it's a way to reach out to as many players as possible to be able to expose their customer community, as well as provide to the customers different tools and solutions that they can experience with. So this is how broadly the classification is. Now, at this point, probably we should go back to our panelists and ask them specific things about, how do different platform companies or different large or small size companies, how do they kind of look at OEM. So let me bring Patrick in first. So Patrick, I think since SAP is pretty large and you have so many different ways of how you collaborate with companies and partner. From an OEM standpoint, is it an important strategy for you, even if at SAP or even for large companies, and why would that be the case?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Shrikant. So OEM is absolutely important, right? And I would say it's important because it's a key value driver. It extends and it expands the value prop of all the partners that are engaged, and it also extends the value for customers. So you can look at this, as I said in my intro, really from two perspectives. Companies partner with SAP for a number of reasons. They partner with us for our customers, right? We have hundreds of thousands of customers at this point. They might partner with us for our data, right? Because we are an ERP vendor. From a historical perspective, we have data across every line of business, from finance through procurement through supply chain through everything else. Companies partner with us because we're a channel, right? We have an extensive sales force and a direct sales force at that. And they partner with us because of the processes we have in place. You mentioned reporting. Companies have been embedding our reporting solutions as an extension to their platforms for a while, and they partner with us for our capabilities in that area, right? And we have an extensive app store. We have a marketplace, as you mentioned, and we have an entire platform that's designed to extend our core applications and solutions and allow partners to plug into that, and therefore tapping into our customers, our data, our channels, and leveraging this infrastructure and process that we put in place. That allows small companies to partner with SAP, a rather large company in the space, to get and extend their reach, while also improving our reach, right? And of course, there's a whole technology play here. Some customers partner with us because they embed and take our technology and use it themselves. Other customers bring unique technology to our platform. So while companies partner with SAP for those reasons, we also partner with others where it makes strategic sense, right? It could be disruptive. And in high tech, it's disrupt or be disrupted. It could be a time to value factor, faster to, it might be faster to partner than it is to develop from scratch. There are two other reasons, if I could just take a second. It might be unique paths, right? Being able to form a partner gives us a unique opportunity in a certain space. There's a massive amount of spend going on right now in semiconductor in the United States. And there are unique partners that have relationships in areas of semiconductor we don't maybe typically talk to. We're a very top-down C-suite board of directors kind of play. There are other partners that are very bottom-up, might be working with engineering and manufacturing. And the two of us have unique paths where by partnering, we help each other. And our technologies are very complementary. There's also focused execution as the final area to talk about, right? SAP offers a modern platform that is easily extendable, right? There are companies out there like WorkSpan that offer a very unique project-oriented kind of CRM complementary solution, and they extend our own platform and give a very focused way of providing solutions that otherwise either one of us alone might not provide. So I hope that answers your question, Shrikant.
Yeah, that answers the question. I had a follow-up for you on that. Is that
Sure.
Because being a large company, you have probably features and solutions that probably has anybody can think of, right? But still, you go ahead, sometimes, a similar analytics company or they're doing something different, you still embed them in your platform. I mean, is that also something that you do? You're not worried about, whether your software will sell less because you're now embedding it with something like
I
that?
think when you talk to any vendor, ultimately they would love to be all things to all people all the time. Who wouldn't want that, right? But the reality is that's never going to be the case. And companies grow through mergers and acquisitions. They buy little pieces of technology. And if I spend money on technology and it's working for me, I might not want to replace that. So there may be reasons always that we would work with other companies in a co-opetition kind of factor, where maybe there's some overlap in the solutions, but together we're still stronger. 1 + 1 = 3, not 1 + 1 = 2 kind of scenarios. The other thing I would say on that line too is there is a huge transformational change in the way that software is going to market, right? Historically, it's been about products, it's been about SKUs, it's been about applications, and it's all been license based. The future is all about clouds and platforms. If you look at historical SAP solutions and pillars, I would compare them to a finely manufactured Swiss watch, beautifully engineered, precision, but not that flexible and adaptable to what's going to change. But the future is more like, say, this Apple Watch. It's a platform. If I wanted to add a new application, a heartbeat monitor or a calendar to a finely tuned, finely engineered Swiss watch, you'd have to completely re-engineer that Swiss watch. But if I want to add a new application to my Apple Watch, it's plug and play, and it takes advantage of all the other data that all the other apps are doing. That is how SAP is going to market. And so it's all about a very stable core that runs the traditional business processes. It is easily extendable, easily extendable on a platform basis where you can plug and play applications into that platform. This allows companies that want to OEM and come to SAP really easy access to do that. And as you've mentioned, we provide an entire framework and process for doing so.
Makes sense. But that's very good to hear. And probably in the audience, if people are thinking of approaching companies like SAP, I think this gives them some sort of a idea how to, because it makes them comfortable in approaching SAP with such ideas. So let me just bring Mike here now. Mike, as a CIO, you're always looking to provide solutions at a rapid pace to your end customers. So in your scheme of things, is OEM a viable strategy, and how are you going about it?
Yeah, so a couple of different use case scenarios. Certainly, there are situations where customers come to us and bring unique challenges to the table that we're maybe not solving today, but need to solve in the future. And there's a trusted relationship with us, and so a lot of customers really rely on us to help them solve these problems. And we have to decide oftentimes, whether this is technology that we're going to develop in-house or whether we're going to partner. And oftentimes, as a CIO, I'm looking at not just building our own IP and our intellectual property and value in the company, but how unique is the value that we're creating in the company? Are there other opportunities in the marketplace that is doing something to solve the problem in a much more unique way, or can do it better than us? Or is this something that we really can't solve very quickly, or in a way that makes sense, that's sustainable? And so we're constantly looking at things, whether a customer is bringing a problem to us, whether a salesperson or a group that's trying to break into a certain market is coming to us and saying, hey, we wish we had these capabilities to round out our suite. And then as well, we have the company itself coming to us with strategic business plans and product strategies. And so as the CIO, I'm constantly weighing as we look at where we're going to invest our time and resources, how to meet those challenges, both with internal resources, but also partnering. And, that's been a common theme. And so I typically look at what problem are we trying to solve? Is it a unique problem? Is it a common problem? Are there other solutions out there? I look at speed to market. Speed, being able to deliver a quality solution very quickly is very important. I look at the unit economics in terms of potential partnerships, the business model, and then obviously the partner fit is very key. People that we partner with, we want to be in common spirit and alignment in terms of business strategy. So that's very important as well.
So great. I mean, Mike, you stressed upon a very important point about when you're OEMing, it's important to really solve a particular problem. You just because you like a particular product, it doesn't make sense to just go ahead and OEM because it may not add value. And then there is very other aspects that you talked about, business and whether it's the right partner and strategies and so forth. So probably in subsequent parts we can go a little deeper there. But do you have an example that you have where you have done an OEM for which has solved a specific problem for you, or you've seen something in the industry?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So at Kaptyn, for example, we have both software technology that we deploy, but also hardware. And so particularly on the hardware and engineering solution, we don't manufacture all of our hardware in-house, right? And so we have a whole supply chain of components that we OEM that make a unique product. We're one of the only providers, for example, of a digital smart meter in North America. And so how do we make that happen? Well, we didn't develop everything in-house. We looked at various capabilities. We looked at the end solution that we needed to deliver to the market. And we pulled together a number of OEMs to participate and bring about the solution. And we have a very unique product in an industry segment for transportation.
Great. Thanks for sharing that example, Mike. I think that really helps connect how you are thinking about OEM. Now let me bring Thomas into the discussion. He's kind of worked very closely with a lot of startups, and I was thinking that if I were to ask the question to him, it should be about startups. So that's where he's most closely connected, and I think many people as they're starting up and building a product, they go through this dilemma about whether OEM is a good strategy for them or not. And Thomas, since you have advised so many companies, maybe it's best that you answer what you feel about.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Shrikant. Thanks so much for that question. I have always believed that the present and the future is all about collaboration, right? Be it a startup or be it a large established organization. And in the SaaS space where I come from and in the software product space, it's all about ecosystems, right? And then Patrick, Mike, they all spoke about ecosystems as well. So it's really about speed to address customer needs and speed to market, which you refer to in your presentation as well. So I thought, let me just look at the journey of a startup. And I'm looking at it from a concept of how a startup could OEM to others, right? I mean, their proposition. So if you look at the journey of the startup, phase one is really where they're trying to establish a product market fit, where perhaps they're looking at some initial customer pilots. Phase two is where they're looking at market penetration. And this is where typically a lot of startups take a direct sales approach. And phase three is where they have achieved some level of maturity in their product, and therefore it is much easier for them to establish a partner ecosystem and then accelerate, revenue growth. But imagine a situation where in phase 2, they can actually do an OEM deal, right? That would be truly transformational for their go-to-market strategy, because suddenly from a one-to-one kind of a selling scenario, they can go to a one-to-many. And let me illustrate this through an example. I mean, I've got lots of examples, but let me give one example of today's discussion. So I work a lot in the HR tech ecosystem. And, there is one company in the talent acquisition space that I work with who have a great, end-to-end recruitment platform, right from sourcing of candidates, matching of those candidates to job descriptions, and then engaging with the candidate, qualifying them, and then, finally the job offers being made. And, we did a white label deal with one of the established job boards, right, which has presence in multiple countries. And, the value proposition for the job board was very significant because they had a host of these enterprise customers, right? And their business was getting pretty much, commoditized. So they said that, look, how do we add value? How do we go with the value proposition to these enterprises, right? And, so they got a product overnight, literally, with their own branding, right? And then they had their sales team armed with this product and to go to sell to enterprises. And imagine the value for the startup. I mean, they got access to a few thousand enterprise customers, several, tens of enterprise sales guys across these markets. And that really accelerated, their own growth. So that's really one way of an OEM. So let me give you a couple of other examples. The other is that, companies also, startups can also look at not just OEMing the complete platform, but perhaps just components of the platform, right? So for instance, the same talent acquisition platform, we have also OEM the parsing engine to an HRMS platform. We have OEM a video interviewing platform separately, right? So there's an opportunity for startups to look at, hey, can I work with my entire platform, or can I look at components? But it calls for a significant mind shift change from the founder to be able to do this. Okay, another reason why this can really add value to a lot of startups is because this is a great way of entering a new market. So let me give you an example. Currently, I'm working with a startup in the HR tech space, and we're looking at entering we've got some decent traction in this part of the world, but our strategy to enter the US potentially could be through an OEM, right? Otherwise, we would have to spend millions of dollars establishing our presence, building a team, raising a lot of money. But imagine if you could get an OEM deal going, right? That would really set the trend. It would establish the product market fit. And then subsequently, we could come in and expand the market, with our own teams. So that's one thing which is happening on the startup side. The other interesting thing is that on the enterprise product side, that's again a very interesting phenomenon that I've come across. There are lots of legacy product companies whose technologies have got outdated. And they are seeking, and one is that they're trying to build new platforms, but they're also aggressively wanting to acquire or partner with OEMs so that they can become more contemporary in their own, in their speed to market and build a competitive advantage. So that's opening the door for many of these partnerships, right? So that's the other trend that I'm seeing in this market. But then the key question is, it's not just about signing an OEM partnership. It's about making it work. And that is perhaps the toughest areas. And that's the reason why a lot of founders sometimes step away from doing OEM deals, because it's about then engaging with the principal company with whom you have OEM, working with their sales organization, designing your go-to-market strategy with them, and literally monitoring the sales guys, right, on a weekly basis to make it happen, having some specific KPIs, having a clear understanding of a minimum, revenue guarantee that you can do, that you can get, because after all, you're also giving them a sweet deal as far as product pricing is concerned. So I think all said and done, I'm a great proponent of the OEM approach, and I believe it can be a winning approach for a startup. It can be a winning approach even for an established company, which is wanting to make themselves more relevant to their customers. But the key is, really the thought process of the founders and the ability of all parties to actually make it happen.
Thanks, Thomas. I think you shared so many perspectives, and the key takeaway that I feel what you're trying to convey is, as a startup matures, there is always a sales process of how to reach the market. And in addition to the direct sales model, if you have an OEM based model and you can be flexible to accommodate the needs of that, it could be a great opportunity or a great success parameter for the startup as well as for an established company. So you also alluded many things about the challenges. So that's our next part. So maybe I'll probably go there and then come back and ask you to elaborate some things over there. So let me jump into our next part of our discussion, which is about we all since we're talking about OEMs, we have highlighted why OEMs, how they're useful, what's the business use case, what problems they solve, what value it brings, how it's a collaborative approach, and so forth. But it's always easy to build a product individually and sell it. When you are in an OEM relationship, it's a pretty complex relationship. So there's so many stakeholders involved, and there are so many aspects that you need to consider before you venture into an OEM sort of a relationship. And if OEMs is a strategy, you're not just stopping at one OEM, you're doing multiple things. So how do you think multiple OEMs, I mean, so how do you handle roadmaps in each situations? How do you handle integration strategy for each of those OEM relationships? How you do customizations, pricing, support, some of the non-functional, some of your OEM partners may be very small, so you don't have challenges, but some of them will be companies like Sept, so their requirements may be huge. So how do you cater to all of that? So just from a roadmap perspective, I wanted to take a minute and give you an example of when we were OEMing one of our offline players. Probably Mike knows this. We had built our own offline player that plugs into learning management system. So if you're taking a learning course and you want to take it offline on a desktop without any internet connection, you could use our offline player. And we had done this in the early 2000s. It's still there, and mostly it's like it supports and works different e-learning standards to make the courses play. Now, in most situations, there were only one or two popular standards that people required support for, and that was supported in the product. But when we were integrating with a specific LMS outside of US, it required us to support a completely new standard. And of course, it was part of our roadmap. Not many customers were requiring it, so it was not still built. What we didn't do as a due diligence was put a date on when that software will be released or when that feature will be released. And in that relationship, in the initial days when it was rolled out, it cost the salespeople a lot of trouble, saying that without this feature, we cannot go to this market. And there was this whole other OEM stuff and everything being done, all other aspects were covered. But this was a roadmap item which both product management said that it's okay, it'll come at some point in the future, but it impacted sales. So to convince sales to move forward. So that was just an example. So that was just the roadmap alignment example that I shared, but I'm sure I can now go back to the panelists and seek their advice of how to make sure that both parties are successful and all the players in the system, in an OEM relationship, though it's great if it really works, but how to go about, making it successful. Let's get some views there. So firstly, let me bring in Mike. Mike, you've probably in your past relationships also been quite closely working with the sales team as well, and you may have I'm pretty sure you've done a lot of OEM deals, both as a technology provider and as well as also, embedding another software into your platform. So how do you motivate sales team in a OEM relationship? Because in a direct sales, it's pretty easy. I mean, it's clear, but in an OEM relationship, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, depending on the OEM model, for example, if you're supplying a component that's embedded and, there's no different sales process, the current sales process that the distributing company may use is the same, nothing changes, then there's not that much of an issue. Maybe you're providing some more education around the capabilities of the component, but to the salesperson, it's transparent. They're selling the same product, and things are okay. But in most cases, that's not the case. And typically, as a supplier, you're providing capabilities that that distributor is charging either incrementally more for, or even a separate line item where it's not guaranteed a sale every time that distributor makes sales of their core product. And so oftentimes what's overlooked that I found is very important is really to understand from your distributor, what are their channels to market, right? Because oftentimes those distributors have direct sales, they have distributors as well, right? And you need to really align the economics to understand, okay, at the sales force level, at the distributor level, how are those organizations compensated and incentivized to sell particular products or solutions, right? And so in many cases, you want to make sure that the salesperson is getting compensated the same way, whether it's your product's component or solution, or even the company own product or solution. And in those cases, sometimes the company is okay, the distributor is okay with making that work. Other times, you may have to discuss developing a special sales fund, typically called a SPIF type of program, where you may, as the OEM, provide extra incentives to make up for any deficits that the company may reduce in terms of commissions for the salespeople, or even market development funds for their channel distributors. And so it's something that gets overlooked a lot, but at the end of the day, what I've seen a lot of times in sales, I know Patrick resonates with this, salespeople are coin operated. There's no magic in compensation plans. Whatever compensation plan you put together, it's a game. Salespeople like to optimize and win the game. And so if they can make more money selling one solution or another, that's what they're going to gravitate towards. And so I think you really need to understand how your partner organization sales works, functions, how the compensation plans relate, and make sure that your product and your solution is aligned.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think that's a very valuable point, and I'm sure we can do a whole session on this at some point of time, as the various strategies that you can do on the sales side. But I think it's very important. It's not just the two products coming together, but understanding how the sales work, and proper incentivization, and making that as a part of your OEM checklist and strategy is key. So thanks for sharing those views, Mike. Thomas, let me bring you in now and ask you the question about brand, because when you're OEMing software, or when you're playing it from the startup perspective, or a technology company that's getting embedded in a platform, you're always worried, like you are there to establish your brand, but this will completely dilute your brand because they expect you to white label it, then your name should not be visible anywhere. So how should startups or CEOs approach this dilemma?
Yeah, thanks, Shrikant. I think that's a very relevant question, and it has given sleepless nights to a lot of, founders. In fact, I know of quite a few founders who have refused to even go the path of OEM because they feel that their investors may pop up the next day and say that, hey, I mean, we don't see your product anywhere, right? So, so I think it's a real question, and it's a question both for the company which is providing the OEM platform, as well as the company which is taking the OEM and embedding into their product. Because as Mike mentioned, it's always at the back of the sales guy's mind. If he knows that he or she knows that it's a third party, how do they really view it? But I think, so let me just touch upon a few areas here. So one of the things that I've seen in an OEM is that typically some of these enterprise product companies which pick a startup and they want to OEM their product, they sometimes seek a lot of customizations, right? And now the problem with customizations, particularly for a company, for a startup, right? So the startup has to customize it significantly so that it fits in into the overall enterprise proposition. Now the challenge for the startup is that if it's still in its early growth stage of the if it's still in an early stage of its growth, then that could be a significant distraction for them. Okay, number one, and number two, it will definitely hamper their own product development cycle, and perhaps at the end of the day they may end up having multiple versions of the same product, which can become a liability somewhere down the line. So my recommendation really for startups is that if there is a lot of customizations to be done, and if you're in a very early stage, unless that relationship is going to be very, very strategic and is going to fetch you something significant, it is better to stay away from that, because, and so I'm specifically talking about SaaS companies, right? Because your SaaS, it's all about recurring revenue, and it's about how fast you can, keep adding innovation to your product and how much you can standardize it. But if you customize it too much and another version comes out of it, then you will really struggle. So that's really the first point. The second point is that I think it's important for these startups to be able to build their own brand, significantly ramp up, their own, sales organizations, and perhaps look at OEM in specific sectors, rather than going all over the place with OEM. So you have to be very strategic with your OEM. You got to figure out, why do you want to do it? Is it a new market entry strategy, that is prompting you to do it? Or are you picking out components from your product and only offering a few of them so that you don't dilute your entire brand? So I think, startup founders need to be very strategic. I mean, they should look at it actively because there are lots of opportunities out there, but they also need to be extremely, extremely strategic. Now, the third thing that I see is that I think, if you have a great proposition and you have a great innovation, then you also should try and negotiate a deal where you can get a byline powered by, right? And a lot of companies are open to that now, because they know that, ultimately, okay, I'm offering a solution in my larger platform to my customer. But if my customer knows that, hey, this powered by company is one of those great innovations and forward looking, then, it changes the imagery. So there could be a rub off of that branding as well. So we are encouraging a lot of our innovative startups to really look at, as part of the deal, to really say that, we'd like it, you can have your core brand there, but, we also want a little powered by over there. So that's really, from the startups, perspective. And, from the larger enterprises perspective, I mean, they also could have dilution, right? I mean, if they have a number of these OEMs plugged in, what would be the perception of the customer? But I think customers to my mind, have gone beyond it. I think it's all about, are my needs as a customer being met? I think customers are also matured. I think they're also looking at, hey, are my needs being met? Am I getting an ROI on my investment? And is there a significant transformation happening? So I think the bigger brands, I think it's really a debate for them between, build versus buy versus partner. And to my mind, they should be less concerned about it because they have a lot to lose if they don't have the right proposition for their customer, and they don't have the speed. So I think a brand would be less of an issue for them. It could be bigger issue for the startup, but if the startup is strategic in their approach, and I've alluded to some of the points, I think it could be a great win-win proposition, and brand dilution really could be managed effectively.
Great, Thomas. I think that was a very comprehensive answer in terms of, and somebody as a startup listening to it would definitely look, I mean, if they're completely looked at OEM as not an option, looking at your answer, they'll probably say that, okay, there is a ray of hope. I could do it in this sector or this segment, and it'll help me in the sales. So thank you for sharing your views on that. So now I want to, I have kept Patrick silent for some time, and I shouldn't be doing that any longer. So let me bring him in and ask him this very important question that I have. So Patrick, I think we alluded to this being a very complex decision where there's so many stakeholders in each company that are involved, and this whole thing has to work seamlessly, because otherwise there are a lot of times and dollars spent and nothing at the end to show. So from your perspective, how does one lower the risk here? Because one big factor would be, why should I get in? I'll spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, and I'll not get anything out of it. So should I really do this? So how do I lower the risk?
So it's an excellent question. Probably a PhD dissertation and thesis in and of itself on an answer. I think Mike and Thomas have given you some concepts already, especially when Mike got into his approach on build versus buy and how to weigh some of those trade-offs. I think Thomas did the same thing when he talked about time to market and really stressed that, and when he also talked about both of them talked about the monetization. I think when you really look at the risks, ultimately, it always comes down to being about the path to monetization. And so let me frame it this way. There's a number of conditions. I'll put it in a framework and maybe give you 2 examples if we have time. So there are a number of conditions to consider when establishing an OEM approach, right? There's governance and alignment between the 2 companies. And this really requires a strong executive sponsorship. It requires strategic elements of a partnership. There's the technology and the innovation aspects that my colleagues have touched on. It also requires alignment in sales and marketing, which we've touched on a little bit, and a whole go-to-market on how are you going to execute and set up the right milestones to monitor that going forward. All of this needs to be put in place if you want to mitigate the risk. Now, when there's development involved, whether it's about customizations or not, there's a solution development aspect to this. There's marketing and content that needs to be considered, and that's why all these frameworks that we're talking about are so important. And sales and ultimately enablement. Mike mentioned the sales are coin operated. If they're not properly enabled, it doesn't work. Let's talk about 2 examples, right? So one of my favorites is big company to big company. I know we're talking about a lot of startups. I'll do that second, but big company to big company, right? A great example from our side is this relationship that we have with JP Morgan Stanley as an example. They have one of the best liquidity management platforms in the market. And when you use it to extend, say, an SAP treasury management, which is a solution that we have that's within our overall SAP Intelligent Enterprise, this offers customers, the value to customers, it offers them real-time cash visibility and allows them to improve liquidity and lower their risk, right? So it's a huge win for customers. The potential market for this is over $2 trillion. And this is estimated based on cash equivalents over our existing customer base. So it's an entirely doable market number, right? So SAP has essentially thousands of customers using treasury management. And for them, when they bring in the JP Morgan solution, they get a seamless experience while increasing their efficiency, they increase their accuracy, they can drive up their security parameters, the whole thing using SAP's platform for security, and they improve their reporting capabilities. Now, for JP Morgan, they get access of their platform to more clients, and therefore more trades, and they drive a competitive advantage, edging out other asset management competitors. And for SAP, right, it strengthens our intelligent enterprise, the plug and play solution via a JPMC partnership. It further enables this platform effect that we've talked about, and it also furthers the value prop of our own treasury management solution. So big company to big company, monetizing it lowers the risk. There's a lot involved. Let me give you another example, right? So during the COVID pandemic, the whole world scrambled to do remote work. So we have solutions that we sell that allow employees to measure their employees' experience. And this wound up absolutely critical as you move SAP alone. We moved 100,000 person company to all working remotely from home. And we did that in a 2-week period. It was absolutely imperative to constantly take a pulse check on employees' well-being and how they're doing. So we took that solution and we sell that to our customers. Well, some of our customers, there's one in particularly, one of the largest insurance companies in the world, health insurance that is, in the world. They, as we were selling it to them, they looked at this solution, they said, wait a minute, our customers need this. We want to resell this solution, an OEM SAP's product, so we can provide well-being to our customers. It was an awesome win-win. In fact, I'd like to give you a third, right? The third example is as you move to this technology and development frameworks, start thinking about minimum viable products. We have startup customers who looked at SAP simply as an additional channel to get to market. Wow, we could leverage SAP's direct sales force and not have to spend money on our own direct sales force, and that'll more than make up for the trade-off in the royalties and everything else that have to be paid and all the entitlements and everything that go along with that process. But when they developed on a unique piece of our technology, I don't want to get into overselling or selling SAP, but when they developed on a piece of SAP's technology on our platform, what they found out in developing an MVP, a minimum viable product, is it wasn't just a channel for them. There are things that they could do with their solution on our platform that they could not do on anybody else's database and anybody else's platform. And that gave them the ability to now, with SAP, actually increase their own value share, while at the same time addressing a need in the marketplace that SAP wasn't addressing. So it was a wonderful way to go to market. The MVP is like a proof of concept, and it also allows us to then do some very targeted selling between the two sales forces and use actual engagements with customers as the enablement. There's an old saying that says a city on a hill can't be hidden. When you have successes that drive value for customers, for the startups, for the platform providers, and it's a win-win-win, that's a city on a hill that can't be hidden, and an MVP is a great path to do that and to minimize risk.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. I think, was there a lot of echo when I just spoke? Maybe yes.
Nope, I can hear you just fine.
I probably heard it. So thank you very much for that, thoughts on how to lower the risk and, how, even large to large companies we can work, large and small companies can work together. So I'm sure on each of these points, I'm thinking, we could do further deeper dive and have a lot more discussion, but good to get these thoughts and ideas to our audience and for them to probably go and, think about OEM as quite a viable strategy. I'm sure we have provided enough food for that today there. So just to make sure that, we summarize everything, I've put together one slide and I'll also talk about the different things that we said today. So overall, as the industry is maturing and the product ecosystem is becoming more and more complex, consumers are touching so many products in a single workflow. OEM is a great channel of how companies can come together and offer a collaborative solution. So both from a platform company's perspective as well as from a startup's perspective, it's equally important to give enough attention to OEMs. And we discussed about many types of, types of different OEMs that you could do. And we also talked about what value it brings, what problems it should solve. We also talked about, the whole collaboration aspect involved in OEM. So those were great inputs. Then we also went about and talked about how the sales process is kind of, really important when it comes to an OEM relationship, and this whole branding, and finally the whole risk aspect. How do you mitigate that? MVP is a great way of looking at things. So, and of course, overall, what it comes is both partners, both CEOs, or both relationship people need to have a very comprehensive checklist if they want to make sure and they want to measure the ROI from their OEM deals on a continuous basis. So on that note, let me say thank you to all of you. And of course, we'll wait for questions, but turn it over to Bhagyashree to kind of conclude this session for us. Bhagyashree, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Shrikant. So I think a quick thing about Harbinger. Harbinger Group provides outsourced product engineering and learning content development services to software vendors and enterprises. We focuses on the HR, education, and healthcare verticals. We also have OEM ready tools and frameworks like Scheme Through and many more that can help in the content authoring, delivery, and analytics. So with that, Shrikant, let's take one question, which we have okay. If the large companies have marketplace, do they always prefer that over OEM solutions? Maybe who would like to go? Patrick?
Can you repeat the question? If for companies with a large marketplace,
Yes.
what's the question? I'm sorry.
So Patrick, I think the way I understood the question was, if large companies have marketplace, then why do they do OEMs also? Is there an OEM relationship that is there, or they only prefer to do the marketplace?
Well, I think we mentioned that all companies eventually would love to be all things to all people all the time, and that's just not possible, right? So you're really looking for that win-win-win, right? That 1 + 1 = 3 scenario. So SAP has a very broad footprint. We sell to we have market share in almost every industry, but there's always going to be something that we don't have that adds value to a customer, right? And if you're a small company looking to partner with a big company that has a marketplace, if you can find that high value prop where you fill that gap, that's a place where a large company would be very interested in OEMing your product. If it gives us a unique path, if it allows us to disrupt, if it allows us to differentiate, we have a fantastic CRM solution. I mentioned a partner company earlier, WorkSpan. They have a wonderful way of doing project-based analysis. Mike talked about how important it is to work with your disti. If you're a distributor and you're reselling items from 2 different OEMs, 2 different equipment manufacturers, whose are you going to sell more of? Whoever gives you the best spiff, perhaps, or whoever's easier to work with, or perhaps the combination of both. How are you easier to work with, right? A WorkSpan type solution in this example provides project-based analysis that a disti can use to drive projects that integrate back into an SAP CRM, and it allows you, without giving up any security protocols, to extend your SAP CRM to distributors, to partners, to an ecosystem that allows it to run as projects, right? Thomas mentioned how important it is to collaborate. In high tech, it's always been about partnering. It's you and your value chain versus your competitors and their value chain. And so any solution that helps that marketplace do that and extend is a good OEM opportunity. And a company, again, I'm a little biased here, but a company like SAP that has a platform that allows you to easily extend it and fill and address gaps and address business problems is the right way to go.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bhagishi, can I just add one line here?
Yeah, sure.
If I look at marketplace and OEM, I would always propagate for, you only that much of energy and time to get things done, right? I would say push for an OEM because a marketplace gives you some branding, but I'm not fully convinced it will give you revenue. So push for an OEM because that will really give you growth.
Great. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you so much. I know we are running short of time, rather we are over time than the scheduled one, but I would still like to take this question, and maybe Mike, if you would like to answer that. When it comes to OEM relationships, is source code licensing would also be the requirement?
Not necessarily. It really depends on what type of solution you're offering. Particularly with embedded components, and also now with everything moving into cloud architectures and services. So I don't think it's necessarily a requirement. In some cases, if the distributor is looking for capabilities that they can build on top of very rapidly, maybe so. But I would say at minimum, particularly when you're working with larger companies, if you're a smaller company, you might not be licensing source code, but you should expect to be able to put source code in escrow.
Okay.
That's a good point.
That's a very good point. All right, so we are done with all questions. Mike have already answered one question on the pricing model. So I think that's all we had on the question and answers. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Shrikant, and to our panelists for this wonderful discussion. And I'm sure we all are going back with some food for thought today. I would also like to thank our viewers for joining this session through Zoom and LinkedIn. And thank you so much for being such an amazing audience. In the meanwhile, if anyone from the audience would have more questions or would like to reach to our panelists, feel free to drop us a line at hsinfo@harbingergroup.com. Thank you once again. Take care and have a great one.